and welcome to the BloodStream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and BloodStream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
On today's show, we have Elsa and Ann Kendall from the Red Ink Project, and we have Lanre Tunji-Ajayi from the Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and Other Inherited Blood Disorders. We're talking to powerful organization-starting advocates today.
Yes!
We have got all of that and more
Woo!
on the episode. Welcome to BloodStream.
And listeners, as always, thank you for joining us today. And if you haven't, hit that subscribe button. You can subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and you can also listen and view us on all the social media channels, especially Facebook.
So enjoy that. I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the BloodStream podcast is indeed made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right, Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda, Amy, get this, believes in a world free of bleeds.
We love it. We love it.
And they're dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, because it's a website, bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the BloodStream podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda. Hi, PGL. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Amy Board. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in.
You've been busy. You've been traveling. You got more travel coming. You're a travel monkey this time of year.
Yes, this has been the most insane travel time. I got back yesterday I got back to my house around 1:30, 2 p.m. I did laundry and I repacked the same suitcase, and I'm here at the office. I'm on camera all day today. And then I leave at 1:30 p.m. to go to the airport, and I'll be gone until next Sunday morning.
How are you holding up?
Pretty good, actually. Pretty good. You know, when I have a good, I don't know, mentality about it, I'm okay. I feel fine. My energy's good. I've been really obnoxious about my sleep. We got caught in the airline kerfuffle when we were leaving for New York last Sunday. So not this past Sunday, but last Sunday. And we were supposed to leave at 7 a.m. and we didn't get out until 3:30 p.m. We were stuck at the airport that whole time.
Oh, man.
And I told our crew, I was like, I had the best attitude. I kind of screwed some things up in terms of our seats. I thought my husband was going to murder me. He didn't. It was so great. We're still married. It's fantastic. We ended up in middle seats.
Oh, no.
He actually got a window, but I got a middle seat. I had a great attitude. Not a given.
That goes a long way, and I'm sure it was appreciated by those around you, that attitude.
Yeah. I mean, when we finally got to New York, that's what I kept telling everybody. I was like, I had a great attitude today. Everyone can suck it. I had a great attitude.
Well, why don't you share with listeners where you're headed to next and what you're doing, because that's kind of interesting.
It is kind of cool. We're actually flying to, not to brag, but we're flying to Florence, Italy, to film with some blood brothers who ride bikes, who cycle professionally, and also amateur cyclists. It's for a series that a client wants to put together, and I'm really excited about it.
Nice. Well, enjoy that. Glad you got your laundry done. Good luck today at the airport. Hopefully nothing goofy, no weird delays.
Yeah, all the things.
I only had one piece of housekeeping I wanted to make listeners aware of before we go into our interviews. So the Hemophilia Federation of America, also known as HFA, has a new initiative called Voice of the Community. And here's what they have to say about it. Your experiences today shape what we build for tomorrow. Let's imagine the next decade together, where every voice is heard. Want to create a better future for bleeding disorders? Don't get left behind. Join a listening session today. Seats are limited. Reserve your spot and spread the word. To get involved, visit hemophiliafed.org and click the Voice of Community clickable underneath the Our Work tab, or you can just follow the link in the program notes. If you're listening, that's the easier thing to do. But, this struck me because I think it's easy for me as a patient at times to feel like nothing ever changes or takes too long to change, and no one's listening to me. My voice doesn't really matter. Who cares? What's the point? Blah, 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 blah. And this is a very specific opportunity to participate in what they're calling listening sessions, to let your voice be heard and let that influence the way HFA is thinking about the future of the organization. So I've signed up for one. I think it's actually this Friday. I highly recommend anybody listening sign up for one. Again, you can go to the Hemophilia Federation website, and under Our Work, you'll see Voice of the Community. Give it a click, or you can follow the link in the program notes. The program notes.
The program notes.
I was going for voice and notes, and it came out notes.
It was great, though. I'm
glad.
It was great. No, I think this is awesome. And just to clarify, listening, like, the community gets to speak, and, those at HFA get to listen.
That's right. Yeah, you're not signing up to get lectured. You're getting to do the talking.
Yeah, it's a vibe. I didn't think that far, but yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, good.
Very important clarification. Awesome. Yeah, so check it out at the HFA website, or check out in the program notes. But from one organization to another. So the Red Ink Project frames itself as rewriting the narrative of women and girls in bleeding disorders. And we had the opportunity recently to speak with Elsa and Ann Kendall to learn all about the Red Ink Project, its inspiration, its mission, and its goals for 2026. And that conversation is coming up right now. All right, BloodStream listeners, I am now joined by Elsa and Ann Kendall to talk about a little something called the Red Ink Project. Elsa and Ann, welcome to BloodStream. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
So, Ann, I'll start with you by asking, or actually, Elsa, let me start with you and ask, how is it that the Red Ink Project came to be? Because I think by answering that question, we're going to learn a bit about you and we can follow up from there.
Yes. Well, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. So the Red Ink Project actually started when I was a student in high school. I just started my second year of college, but it started in my junior year of high school, so a few years ago now, as a research project into all the different ways the federal government and its many agencies and institutions affects the daily lives of people with bleeding disorders. From that, it sort of evolved into, these are some specific issues that affect women and girls with bleeding disorders within the community, like me. And from there, it turned into my senior capstone project of starting a nonprofit as the Red Ink Project, dedicated to women and girls with bleeding disorders. So it's been a multi-year process, and we're excited to be here in 2025, getting started.
Well, congratulations on that. Congratulations on being in the second year of college. I'm sure that's coming with all sorts of new inputs and considerations. But with respect to the Red Ink Project, what from your personal story inspired you to want to, because starting a nonprofit, I mean, that's no small task. So what was it from your personal story that inspired you to go that far?
Well, I would say that it started, so I was 9 years old the first time I had the opportunity to attend a legislative advocacy conference. And that was my first real experience with telling my story as, at the time, a young woman with a bleeding disorder, which is a rarity within the community. And so as I grew up and learned more about the challenges of being a young woman in the bleeding disorders community, I wanted to really create a space for women and girls to come together, to learn, to talk about their stories and experiences, and to write and be creative with those stories, just since I had so many positive experiences with advocacy growing up that I know are not available to everyone. So thus the Red Ink Project and the idea of rewriting our collective narrative as women and girls with bleeding disorders was born.
And I'm curious, as Elsa talks about advocating from the age of 9, I imagine at a minimum she must have had a chaperone or somebody who was bringing her to these places. So how has the role of advocacy, I guess, played a part in your life?
In many ways. So, part of it is that it took so long to get Elsa's diagnosis, which, many women and young girls face this as well. And, we suspected Elsa had a bleeding disorder at 3 months old, and it took us until she was just past 6 years old to get the diagnosis, and we know from so many other folks we've talked to, 6 years is not the longest journey out there, but it was still in those years where, as parents, we took her to that 3-month-old visit, showed all the bruises on her feet, and immediately, they bring in a second doctor so they can photograph, the damage to your child. So I think jumping in as an advocate started pretty much from day one for having, Elsa, because we were constantly navigating that path. And before we became connected with our, NHF chapters, we've lived in several different places as she's grown up. We were navigating that on our own. So I would say that was, it's a kind of a scary thing, when they're documenting those pictures of your baby's bruised feet, and you have nobody to talk to. And certainly after we went further into the process, and then we realized, through one wonderful doctor, Seattle Children's, how rare it was at the time for women to even get this diagnosis. So, you just imagine she's a little kid and you're going through this diagnosis process, then they're telling you how rare it is, but there's still some hesitancy there to give her the label of hemophilia. On her first, medical ID bracelets, how they've got so many words on there because symptomatic carrier hemophilia A, and you're just like, oh my, a normal mortal person is not going to understand what that means. So it feels like even when she finally got the diagnosis, it was constantly jumping in and asking why is she different than her dad, who bleeds far less than she does, right? Why she has less factor than he does? Why is she different? Why is the labeling, the nomenclature so different? So there's that, background, and constantly, trying to find the best doctor to work with her and to make sure she's feeling good. And then certainly once we were living in the DC area, we became very involved with the Virginia Hemophilia Foundation and HACA, which is the metro area there in DC. So as far as going up to the Hill or going to the State House, we had mentors and groups that led us on that process to really help us both develop our voices for, standing up for what not just women and girls, but all people with bleeding disorders need.
Elsa, I don't know if I read it on your website or something that you'd sent to us, but something that you'd written really resonated with me. And it was about being unsure in your body as a young kid, not being able to trust your body while, wanting to play and, run, jump, climb trees, kid things. That really resonated. And I'm curious, even as a 40-year-old adult, I find myself grappling at times with a deep distrust of my body in certain moments. Do you find yourself still wrestling with that, or is that something that you feel as though you've kind of gotten a good grip on?
I would say absolutely. It's depending on the day. It is challenging to sort of make peace with the fact that I don't always have control over anything that's happening in my body. All that I can do is sort of mitigate the damage or the impact to my day and to my mental state. And I think part of that honestly really started when I started menstruation, because at that point, I was not treating for the impact my bleeding disorder was having on my periods. And so I think as I've started to do more and more of that, I feel like that has actually given me more control over how I feel in my body and the amount of surety I have of, oh, okay, yes, I'm going to get up. This is what I'm going to do today. And I have more tools now with medication and access to treatment and doctors who have been willing to prescribe factor treatment for that now than certainly I did growing up. So I would say, yes, it is definitely improved. However, it's definitely still a day-by-day basis of, do I feel like I have control over what's going on, or do I feel like everything is sort of spinning and I'm just trying to hang on and get through the day and get my schoolwork done and, live to tell another story.
Yeah, that sounds very human. It resonates. This is a pretty rudimentary question, but I'm curious to hear you answer it. How would you describe your experience of being a person with hemophilia before you had access to Factor and after?
That's a great question. So I never necessarily did not have access to Factor, in that I always had emergency doses on hand in case of a head injury or something like that. But my journey to learning to self-infuse only began in the middle of high school at the start of my junior year. And that, I feel like, has changed a lot, just because it is, for me personally, so much more effective than other treatments. And that having that skill, even on the days when my veins are fragile, they roll, they like to puncture. So it might be 3, 4, 5, 7 needle sticks, depending on the day, which is always fun to deal with. But having access to that and the ability to take medication when I need it has been really important. I think, honestly, for my self-confidence in being able to go out and do activities and go through, a span of 4 hours without necessarily worrying all the time intensely about what my body is doing. So that has been really key, I think, over the past few years, to being able to be sort of an independent young adult and try and, still, keep up with sort of the normal everyday things of schoolwork without necessarily being in constant fear or stress.
And Patrick, if I may, part of this is really, having a doctor that was willing to prescribe her Factor. And that didn't happen until high school. So that was a huge leap and a huge change. Whereas we had been asking for years, as soon as she got her period, for her to go on some sort of prophylaxis treatment with Factor. So that took 5 years of asking before we got to a doctor that was willing to try it. Still limited at 2 doses a month. But nonetheless, that was a huge leap from, keep trying the tranexamic acid. And no matter how many times you tell folks, the doctors you have, that doesn't do anything. Or being recommended, hormonal treatments that have black box warnings on them for an 11-year-old. And it's like, well, why would I allow my child to take that? I would never, anyway. And, and as a parent, being labeled the difficult parent because I keep asking questions. What is the best treatment for my child? Well, and we had one wonderful doctor who was never a doctor that she was able to see, but someone I had met through a number of conferences who, just advised me, Anne, would they tell this to a mother of a boy? And I'm like, well, of course not. And he's like, then you have to keep asking. So I did. And eventually
Here we are.
Here we are. We got to a doctor who was, willing to experiment. And I would say that doctor is phenomenal, and was also willing to experiment with alternative treatments as well, including acupuncture for her to help with some of the symptoms of her period. So we got really lucky.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't have to get lucky to get the treatment that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
No, you shouldn't have to get lucky. And I'm wondering if there's anything you learned that if you were to go back 5, 6, 7 years, or if you were to advise a mother of, a girl like Elsa at age 9 or 10 or 11, is there anything you would do differently, or you now have knowledge that you would have maybe just tried a different tactic? I'm curious if anything bubbles up for you.
I think really is, don't let them bring you down, right? Because, you ultimately know your child and their whole medical history at any moment of the day, and just keep asking, even when doctors give you the look, even when folks from, maybe your local chapter give you the look that you're being too difficult. And why do you keep asking for things? And you just have to keep asking. And even if it takes 5 years, and certainly we have plenty of stories from other folks we've met over the years who have gone through the same experience, and you just have to keep pushing. And you still see plenty of stories of women who aren't able to get any treatment at all, or their hematologist won't help them at all. And they're suffering, and they're into their 50s and 60s. And, so I think that sadness is a bit of a motivator at the same time. Like, whatever we can do to help people, just keep asking your doctor. And we had to change treatment centers a couple of times and we had that ability. We had that privilege. We had the insurance coverage. We had the ability to drive across state lines to get to doctors that would help. Not everybody has that. So, for that advice, all you can do is keep asking. Like, will you treat my child if they're, in a different state? What can we do to make this happen? Because if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. So, and it's headbanging on the brick wall a lot of days. But you just have to keep going.
I think that's a lot of advocacy, is persevering through the headbanging on the brick wall and eventually getting to some sort of opening and going, aha, a way forward. Well, let's bring this back to the Red Ink Project. So Elsa, given what your mom's just shared and what you shared as well about the prevalence of women with bleeding disorders and how underserved in general they are, what does all of that mean for the Red Ink Project for the rest of 2025 and going into 2026?
Yes. Well, I think all of that means that we want to, in this project, in the Red Ink Project, center the experiences, manifold as they are, of women and girls, and provide a space for women and girls to become comfortable with their own stories and talking about their own stories, and about the experiences that are unique to us. I think back to even some of those early advocacy events where I didn't necessarily feel comfortable talking about, my period, but that is a valid symptom that can be impacted by a bleeding disorder. And, that experience should also be honored, and you should feel comfortable talking about that, even if everyone else in the room is not necessarily talking about the same experience. So I think we really wanted to create a set of programs that will help women and girls define their voices through writing and through conversations, and to support the community that supported us through many conversations and questions, and attempts to leap forward. So for the Red Ink Project, we're still very much getting started. We're in a startup mode, so we are hoping for support from the community, and we are looking forward to what will likely be our first event in conjunction with Believe Limited, the screening of the film Dismissed, which we are very excited to see on February 14th, 2026 of this coming year. So we're getting going, we're getting our programs worked out, and we're looking forward to launching ahead in the new year.
That's tremendous. And again, congratulations on such a huge undertaking at, an earlier age in life than most people start a nonprofit organization. Most people never do. I don't know if you knew that, let alone start one while in high school. So, and I imagine for you, there's got to be an immense amount of pride in seeing what Elsa has done with her advocacy work.
Oh, certainly. We really do focus on, we never think of it as an adverse situation, that her having a bleeding disorder. And, a lot of times people will ask parents like myself, how do you make it all work? How does it go through your day? And it's like, well, that's just part of our life. Everybody has something, right? So, but we do really champion that she's dug in to learn as much as she can about not only the bleeding disorder, but, when it started with that first project back in her junior year of high school, how many government agencies have hands on her body at any day of the year? It's immense how many people and how many working parts. And certainly we're facing some challenges with our government agencies right now, and their administration. So that you can't think about that part too much, because that spins it off into a lot of worry, and you just can't do that. So yeah, we're really proud of her dad and I, David, that she's able to not only work through the challenges of having her bleeding disorder, but also turn that into something that can help other women to, when once we get our journal launched and start hosting our writing workshops, that it builds a community that's really based on shared experiences, and importantly, that women and girls with bleeding disorders aren't just periods, right? There's so much more that can impact them, from, joint health and bones, potential future osteoporosis issues. There's injuries aside, that a lot binds, the blood binds them, which was the whole idea when Elsa was brainstorming names. Yes. It's like, well, blood is red, and we're trying to write something. So that's, a birth of a name. So yeah, we're very proud of her accomplishments, and we look forward to seeing where she can take it, especially now with her studies in college and her interests in anthropology and
medical humanities.
Yeah, medical humanities and the arts, and just seeing how those things all dovetail together for her.
That's a great little constellation that are those your areas of focus in general?
Yes, I'm majoring in actually cultural and linguistic anthropology with a minor in art history, but I am very interested in digital storytelling tools like story maps, which I love because they're such creative ways to share stories, and particularly when it comes to advocacy, I think anything multimodal that's not just text or just speech is really interesting and innovative. And I also love the medical humanities. So I am considering a certificate in medical humanities from my current institution. So we'll see how it all shakes out, but yes.
Good on you. Congratulations. And for listeners, viewers, the redinkproject.org is the website where you can find all the information about the Red Ink Project. And is there anywhere else, Elsa, that you'd like to direct people, or any ways they can get in touch with you that are preferable?
We have a contact page on our website, so feel free to shoot us an email to get involved or get on our mailing list. Myself and my mom will also be posting on LinkedIn and our social media, particularly as we get closer to that dismissed film screening. So please stay tuned for updates and more news.
And we will certainly be talking about that on BloodStream as it gets closer as well, so you'll have additional support on that screening. For sure. Last question that I want to ask you, I gave your mom the chance to kind of reflect on, is there anything that you would offer yourself or someone in your position today, offer yourself, 10 years ago? And her response was keep asking, persevere, essentially, keep asking those questions, keep asking, keep going. What about for you? Is there anything that you would like to share with, I don't know how many 10-year-old girls are listening to this, but certainly even girls your own age, women your own age, older, women of all ages. You've gone through quite an experience. You've done something proactive with it and turned it into something for good. Is there anything else you'd like to offer people who may be listening?
I think there are two different things. The first being be curious. Historically, folks in the medical community have not necessarily been curious about the experiences of women and girls. And so I think be curious about your own experiences, question what you're feeling to kind of reflect yourself on what you're experiencing, in whether it's in doctor's appointments or how you're treated at school, or now that I'm in the college arena, the accommodations office. Think about those experiences, make notes on those experiences so you have a deeper understanding of sort of the conditions in which you're living and operating. Be curious always, just because that is what it lets you keep asking. And know that I think particularly in the bleeding disorders community, there's this interesting balance between sort of the negativity or challenge associated with the symptoms we experience and the incredible opportunities there are for community building and for just once in a lifetime experiences. I got to go to the CSL Bearing Junior National Championship one year, and that was certainly something I never would have gotten to do otherwise. All the opportunities I've had to do legislative advocacy and to just meet other people like me who have similar experiences, that is very important. And then finally, to connect your experience across other lived experiences. So whether that's other women looking at reproductive justice issues, whether that's with other folks working in rare disease patient advocacy. I'm a member of the Young Adult Rare Representatives with the Every Life Foundation, which has been a wonderful opportunity to just meet other folks living with rare diseases and navigating a lot of the same challenges just across different disease states. So that I think is really impactful because it helps give you a bit of perspective on your experiences, your condition, but to help to know that you're most certainly not alone. So that would be my advice for the next generation navigating growing up with a bleeding disorder, and for anyone else listening today.
Be curious, connect your experiences to others, and keep asking questions. I think those are 3 solid takeaways from our 20 minutes together. So I think we've done a good job here today, Elsa and Anne, and I appreciate you joining me for this time. And we'll certainly talk again when the screening either is about to happen or has just happened. Actually, let's make that the plan. Let's do a little recap after the screening to hear about the event, hear any updates related to the Red Ink Project. So let's make it a plan to talk after the February 14th event. Deal?
Wonderful.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Anne. I love hearing about the Red Ink project. I just think she's so inspiring. It's fantastic. So I'm so glad we got a chance to highlight her on the show.
I agree. Yeah, Elsa is quite impressive. And so are you, but Elsa's particularly impressive.
No, particularly impressive. No, for totes for sure. Okay, Patrick, what do we have coming up next?
Well, speaking of impressive people, Lanre Tunji-Ajayi has done a number of things in her career to advocate for people with sickle cell in and out of Canada. One of those things she's done is set up the Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and Other Inherited Blood Disorders. And she joined us to talk about the organization, its mission, and what they're up to. And you can hear that right now. All right, joining me now is Lanre from the Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and Other Inherited Blood Disorders to talk a little bit about her journey, the organization, and its mission. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So let's start here. What exactly led to the creation of GANSID?
Yeah. So for myself, I got here due to my own personal tragedy, having lost one of my brothers to complications of sickle cell disease about 27 years ago. And, sickle cell disease is one of the most common monogenic inherited blood disorders in the world. Yet there's a lot that still we have not known about this disorder. And so when I lost my brother at a tender age of 30 years old, I thought I got to do something. I got to do something to ensure that we don't continue to lose young people to preventable complications. So eventually, this led to me helping to establish a few organizations and driving advocacy in Canada. He also led me to co-chair the Network for Red Blood Disorders in Canada, which was actually my first introduction to not just sickle cell, but all the, blood disorders and seeing what we were able to achieve through the Network for Red Blood Disorders in Canada. I think that's what led myself and a few other global advocates to seeing the value in co-establishing the Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and other inherited blood disorders.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your brother. Having lost my brother to complications from hemophilia, I can empathize to a certain degree. So thank you for sharing that. What led you to focus not just on sickle cell, but other rare inherited blood disorders as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Again, I think my work with Network for Red Blood Disorders in Canada actually exposed me to all of the other challenges that other people also are having. Like, you find that sometimes you're so much engrossed in your own thing and what's happening in your own space that you don't really know much about other people and what they are going through. But then when I met with the other organizations having the other disorders, and I saw these are real challenges as well. But when we do come together, when we advocate together, we're able to drive changes together. That was a big part of, let's replicate this at global level, whereby in different countries, this organization can come together and they can advocate together, they can push together with their own government to, raise awareness, number one, around inherited blood disorders and, this class of disorders, and also to ensure that there is improved access, right? To treatment, and care, for those who are affected. So, and for me, the more I am in this space, the more I develop empathy. Not just for sickle cell that got me here in the first place, but for all inherited blood disorders. I was recently in Sierra Leone and I met a mother whose son has hemophilia. And she said to me, my son doesn't go to school anymore. And I'm like, why? And I said, because my son, because he did from the joint, he's badly deformed, and the kid just don't understand, they make fun of him. So I would rather keep him at home than send him to school and then make fun of him. So you find that in many parts of the world, there is no adequate treatment. You don't see people deformed with hemophilia in US, in Canada, in UK, but in many countries of the world, in Africa and in Southeast Asia, it's still reality for many people. And when you see this kind of situation, it breaks your heart and you want to do everything you can do to support the people.
I that resonates. My experiences going to different parts of the world and meeting people with hemophilia opened my eyes to just how different the condition looks when you don't have access to
Yeah.
sustainable,
Yeah.
predictable care. So I
Yeah.
very much appreciate what you're saying. Are there any 2025 victories or highlights from an advocacy perspective that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I tell you, one thing that the GATS City is currently doing is traveling and meeting with governments. Because we're a very young organization, we have to, number one, ensure that we are recognized and the work we do is recognized. So we meet with governments, we meet with clinicians, we meet with hospitals, we introduce cancer, and we talk about what are the gaps in your own country and how can we help. And we bring the patient groups together, bleeding disorders, hemoglobinopathies, and others that each country might have. We bring these organizations together and we meet with them to discuss the gaps in the country and how we can support the government and also the organizations and the hospitals, to resolve those gaps. So that's one big thing that we've been doing 2025. That has led us to like Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Malaysia, many of these countries where we visited in 2025. In terms of advocacy, we actually introduced the Inherited Blood Disorders Day Bill, but again, because of the election that happened recently in Canada, we now have to reintroduce the bill which we are working on. And we want all countries to introduce this bill in order to raise awareness because it's very important that a day is set aside for inherited blood disorders, right? If we do that, it will ensure that, all of these otherwise separate and unique rare inherited blood disorders are under one umbrella. We can unify our efforts around advocacy. We can maximize our visibility. And, this is a community that is often overlooked and may lack adequate access to medical care and resources. If we can have this one day, to bring together the community and, and even at the global level, to give a collective voice to the increasing number of people living with inherited blood disorders, I think he would really make a lot of difference. And so these are the things that we are working on.
Understood. And in addition to working on that, are there other 2026 priorities or points of emphasis that you are excited to share?
Yes. So before I go to 2026, I wanted to say that we have upcoming Congress on November 14 and 15. It's a 2-day Congress, which brings clinicians, researchers, patients, their families, advocates together to learn together, over a space of 2 days, a network, and, which is going to be amazing. In 2026, we will continue to drive and build cross-disease collaboration in countries. Currently, we have 125 member organizations in 35 countries. And we will continue to build and advance cross-district collaborations among these organizations in the country. We also hope to publish some of our work. We're very young, we're only 2.5 years old, but we've already started to work on different studies in the space, and we'll be publishing some of our work. And so, again, we're also going to be holding our first in-person Congress in 2026. We're looking at India. as the location of the in-person Congress. And we will continue to build capacity of clinicians who are serving people with inherited blood disease. That's what we have a physician mentorship program whereby seasoned hematologists will mentor primary care doctors, nurse practitioners, and so on and so forth. Because in many of these countries, these inherited blood disorders are treated not by hematologists because they don't have hematologists in some of these countries. So they have to mentor those who are there on ground to do this work to ensure that they are able to provide quality care for the patient community. And we also continue to build capacity of the patient group. So we have an HIT module online course that patient organization can take to improve their leadership skills. We continue with that and with online webinars and so on and so forth. So these are some of the work that we will continue to advance in 2020.
And that's a lot of work. You mentioned we. Who's helping you to pull off all this work?
Well, I'm lucky to have, a few people. We don't have a lot of people, but we do have few dedicated people. We have a scientific working group that's very serious about, things around clinical trials. So we have program around clinical trials. As a matter of fact, we have recently um, uh, did a portal on our website whereby anywhere you are in the world, it doesn't matter, you can be able to look at clinical trials in your own disease area and in your own locality. So they did amazing work with that. And they are also working on a project to identify what are the barriers, what are the challenges, and um, that is not allowing many more sites to qualify for clinical trials because again you find that sometimes where the disease burden is high, there's no clinical trials happening there. Most clinical trials are happening in North America and UK, and but what happens to Africa? What happens to Southeast Asia, South America? So what are the barriers and what are the recommendations to overcome these barriers? So amazing team in the scientific working group. They are also hoping to do something similar to what hemophilia has done with the World Bleeding Disorders Registry. They're also hoping to do that for sickle cell because sickle cell is huge and there's no coordinated global registry. So we are working on this initiative. We also have a healthcare provider working group that works on education curriculum for healthcare providers and so on and so forth. And then I have a very dedicated administrative assistant, Daniela, that really supports me and help me to, get many of my operational items done each day. So yeah, it's a small team, but a very mighty team.
It must be. It really must be. You mentioned clinical trials, and I want to follow up with you on exactly the point you made that so often the patients that are most in need, patients from lower and middle income countries that don't have sustainable, predictable access to therapies, those countries are generally not countries that are participating in clinical trials. We're not recruiting those patients. We're not getting those patients advanced opportunities to therapy. I understand that there is ethical concern because we don't necessarily want to quote unquote experiment on the poorest amongst us. That's not what we're trying to do either. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate why that is protecting people. But I do find myself frustrated by the fact that people who most need these therapies aren't in clinical trials. So I'm
Yeah,
curious to hear you reflect on how do we advance, how do we make some progress in that territory without compromising the ethics of doing
yeah.
things appropriately?
That's a very good question. So, that is what actually also part of what led us to start to look at, do a study on, what are the barriers and challenges, there's not allowing site to also qualify for as clinical trial sites. So, I wanted to use sickle cell disease as an example. So, you find that sickle cell disease, there are different variations of the disease And you find some variations in some parts of the world that you will not find in other parts of the world. So, for instance, in the Middle East, there are some variations of sickle cell, like in Oman and Kuwait, that is not anywhere else. It's not in Africa, it's not in India, it's not in any. And when you do clinical trials, so you do your phase one and phase two, and you're focusing your study in North America or UK, and you're not extending to other parts of the world, it's a big problem because you didn't go to your phase three, for instance, and then you expand it because you didn't include these people in phase one and phase two. Then you start to see things that you did not even envisage, and then that comes apart. So there is one big issue when we're not looking at it, being more inclusive in who we are engaging in clinical trials. Yes, we understand there are historical reasons why many people don't even want to participate also in clinical trials. And that is, I mean, looking about the to KG study in the US where, people, black men were used and, in a study without they being known what was being done to them. We understand that has left a bad taste in many people's mouth and they don't want to be used as guinea pig, quote unquote. However, I think with all of the regulations and what you have to do when you have to develop a clinical trials, and there are so many guidelines and regulations that you have to follow that I don't think it's practically even possible to start to use equal genetics. I think it's in reason awareness to say, even as someone who is participating in a clinical trial, I have the option to opt out at any time. So I think in educating people, helping them to understand what their rights are, right? And they can exercise their right, I think is very important. At the upcoming American Society of Hematology meeting that's coming up in Orlando, Florida, I'll be speaking on a panel, and the panel is on clinical trials, and I'll be speaking on people with lived experience and their participation in clinical trials. And so, for me, it's very important that we educate, we raise awareness, but we also ensure that people that we want to participate, we involve them and engage them in the process from the beginning. They are to see themselves as integral part of clinical trials and not just as subjects. And then they have to see themselves also representing in leadership, right? Because if you don't see yourself represented, you're second guessing yourself. Like, why am I not? I don't see anyone that looks like me. Is this really for me? And are they gonna use me? Or like, so you might have doubts, right? So you have to be inclusive. The principles of diversity, equity, inclusion need to be in clinical trials, and then that is in the part of participants, people with lived experience. When you're talking about the size themselves, they have barriers. They cannot meet the standard. Why had they not met the standard? How can we help them meet the standard? What do we need to put in place for them to meet the standard? So that we can have even more sites, in the countries also qualifying as clinical trial sites. And that way, we would be able to have more people participate in clinical trials. And I can give you a quick example. In Canada, at one point, our patients don't want to be involved in clinical trials. They were very unsure, and they were not trusting of intentions, and then you would hear comments like, let others do it. If the drug is approved, then I'll use it. And then we start to do a lot of education around that and say, who is that other person that's going to, like, who are you referring to? And then we start to also educate people around your right. You have a right. And these are the regulations that are in place. So you can't be used as a guinea pig. And so we've moved from that I don't want to be part of. I want somebody else to do it. And then I will do the medication when it's approved to where are the clinical trials so we can be part of those clinical trials. We want to be part of clinical trials. And they learn that sometimes clinical trials could be life-saving. You're part of a clinical trial that provides you with a cure. This happens sometimes. And so with more education, awareness around it, you'll find more people are now interested in this product.
Makes great sense, of course, and I appreciate that specific example. With the few minutes we have left, I want to ask you, is there any particular message that you would like to share with this audience? We've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but if people could take away one thing from this conversation, what would you like that thing to be?
So I'm going to go with the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and other inherited blood disorders is about us and for us. And so I'm encouraging every organization, every clinician that is in the space to lend their voice and join GANSI's effort in advancing improved access to treatment and care for all people affected by inherited blood disorders, regardless of where they live or not. Together, we can do it. Thank you.
And where can people go to learn more?
So they can go to our website at www.inheritedblood-disorders.org. So inheritedblood-disorders.org. They can learn more. They can see information about upcoming events and education sessions, the Congress, and so on and so forth. And even if you're a Christian group in this state that wants to join GANSIS, there's application form. It takes you about 5 minutes to complete. There is no fee to join. For clinicians, physicians, you want to be a mentor or you want to be mentored, information is on the website. All you need to know is on the website. And if you're an individual or someone who wants to learn more about clinical trials in your own jurisdiction, you can use the portal. It's free. It's on the website as well. www.inheritedblood-disorders.org. Thank you.
Excellent. And we'll have that in the program notes as well. Lanre, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I am impressed by the amount of work that you're doing. I hope that your team continues to expand so that you have more and more capacity. And I would love to check in again down the road. So maybe in 3 or 6 months, we'll do this again. Thanks again, Elsa, Ann, and Lanre for joining the program today. And thanks, of course, to our presenting sponsor, Takeda, bleedingdisorders.com for more. We could not produce this show without your support, and we are grateful for it. Okay, Bordo, the next episode comes out November 21st. What can the listeners expect to hear?
We have another gene therapy segment, and this one is really cool. We're actually kind of going through the history of gene therapy research, and we're doing a callback to Portraits of Progress, which is a wonderful initiative that came out of CSL Behring, and so we're really excited for that. And the I'm Fine segment is back.
Yes. Welcome back. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Fine. I'm fine.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
I'm fine.
It's back.
We love that segment, and it's back. So anyway, good stuff. Next episode.
And with that, that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the BloodStream podcast wherever you listen to have that next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
And as always, you can email us at mailback@bloodstreammedia.com. That is the perfect way that you can inquire about casting opportunities, or if you would like to share your story on the show, we would love to hear from you. So please email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com, or you can find us on social media.
I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.